Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming. Welcome. My name is Zachary. I'm a librarian here at the Northeast Harbor Library. Please take this opportunity to silence your phones if you haven't already. And while you do, I'll tell you that the library is able to offer free programs like this year-round, thanks to the donations of our supporters and our vibrant creative community. So coming up next Wednesday at 5:30, we have a lecture on the colonial history of MDI. That's with the Mount Desert Island Historical Society. And tomorrow, June 5th at 4:30, Down East Restorative Justice is holding a discussion group on the state of women's rights in our country and community. So to hear more about that and all of our upcoming programs, you can sign up for our Sunday newsletter by the table at the entrance. Tonight's presenter has had an extensive track record as a competitor, promoter, instructor, and record setter in logging sports with her company, the Axewomen Loggers of Maine. In addition, she's deeply involved in preserving the heritage of forestry in her role as a board member at the Maine Forest Logging Museum. Please welcome Alissa Wetherbee.
Hey, thank you. Thank you guys all so much for coming out to learn a little bit about Lumberjills tonight. I want to thank my husband, Mike, who is my computer genius and put together all the slideshow with all the pictures that I have been emailing him. And a huge thank you to Zach for inviting us, for finding us and reaching out to us. So my name is Alissa Wetherbee, and I grew up here on MDI. That was my elementary school right across the street. And this was actually my childhood library, which is really cool. It looks a lot different now than it did 40 years ago. but yeah, so I was super excited when I got the email from Zach and he invited us to come and do this. So growing up here in Maine and on MDI, one of my favorite childhood memories was cutting firewood with my family, like going out in the woods and cutting it and hauling it, bringing it back to the house, stacking it, splitting it. It was just like the best memories I have growing up, and getting home from school and taking turns with my sisters filling the wood box to keep our wood stove going. So I think it was kind of a natural fit that I eventually became a timber sports athlete. You guys all know what timber sports are, right? Anyone?
No.
All right, so think of track and field, but instead of running and jumping and pole vaulting, we are chopping and sawing and log rolling. So very similar to track and field, just different events. And it's all forestry and logging related. So as you can imagine, it's always been a pretty male-dominated sport. So it's been really great over the years. I started competing professionally 25 years ago. So it's been incredible to see how our sport has grown just in that time. When I first started competing, there were not that many competitions just for women. We were allowed to compete, but we were competing against the men. So we were chopping and sawing against men. A lot of the events like chainsaw racing and axe throwing, stuff that's more for accuracy and speed, that's kind of, level across the board. And I definitely won my fair share of those competitions over the years. But, to be honest, on the average, most men are just bigger and stronger than most women. So it was really hard for the women to place and earn money in competitions like the chopping events. So it's been incredible just to watch our sport really evolve over the years. The first time that I went to our world championships, which are held in Boonville, New York, every August, I had no idea what to expect. And Boonville was one of the competitions that actually had a women's day and then a men's day. And this was 20 years ago. So I think they were kind of ahead of their time in timber sports. It was really amazing the day that we went out there to start competing to see the grandstands packed with people hours and hours before the competition even started. Like, all of these people were packed in the stands to watch women chop wood, which I thought was just incredible. I'm like, wow, I never would have expected that. And they sat there all day and they cheered for all of us. And I mean, it was just incredibly amazing to see. And it opened my eyes that there's really an interest in, people want to see women do this sport. And it kind of made me realize that I really wanted to do something to highlight the women of the sport and of forestry and timber-related industries, and just, to show what these women are doing and what they're capable of and how amazing they are. There's a million lumberjack shows out there. And honestly, if you've seen one, you've seen them all. There are some really great ones, and there are some really great competitors that do them. But unfortunately, a lot of them are really scripted, and they tend to make fun of lumberjacks, and they're filled with corny lumberjack jokes, which just isn't really necessary. And I just wanted to show the other side of it, that these women are professional competitors. These women do compete, and they work in the woods, and they work in forestry. Timber sports is considered a heritage sport. So every single event that we do as a sport now came from a job that someone did in the woods hundreds of years ago. So crosscut saws and axes were used to fell the trees, to knock them down. Crosscut saws and axes were also used to then cut the logs up into manageable lengths, to move them to the rivers, to use the waterways, to get these logs into town. So our sport of log rolling is actually based upon the river drivers, the log drivers, having to run out onto the log jams, break up the log jams, and then once all these logs started moving, those guys had to balance on moving spinning logs down the river until they could hop off somewhere safely. So there's just a really incredible history, and so that's what made me want to start up our Axwomen Loggers of Maine team. So I had met all these incredible women, and I said, let's do this. Let's show the world what timber sports and what women in timber sports and forestry is really all about. So because of what I've done and what I had done up until this point, it actually has allowed me to make some really cool history myself. So in 2019, I became the first person to log roll across the Mississippi River. So it was a mile across. Can you guys see me on here? Yeah. So I'm right here in the middle of the river, balancing on a log. So that one was a mile, and
unless you're steering the log, right?
Well, I was running backwards to keep the log spinning forwards. So, and then 2 years ago, in 2023, we came up with the great idea to log roll across the Missouri River, the first person to ever do that. And that ended up being almost 3 miles across. Because with the current, you kind of go diagonal, and so it was pretty incredible. And that was actually the last wild stretch of the Missouri River. So we started in South Dakota, and we went across, landed in Nebraska to start to kick off the Missouri River Outdoor Expo, which is an incredible expo we do each year. Yeah.
So my question is that there are lots of boats that travel those rivers. So do you have a way to steer out of their way if they're coming?
No, that's an excellent question. Do you mind if we pause for a second and I talk? So the Missouri was not, it's more recreational boats that are out there, fishermen and stuff like that. So that wasn't so much of an issue. The big one was the Mississippi River, because they're the barges that just fly up and down that river, and they were definitely not going to shut that down for some girl to log roll across their river. So Mike actually had worked for a year of planning and permitting and getting everything in place with all of the agencies involved. And he had reached out to the tugboat and the barge companies, and all of these people, they all pulled together and they said, you know, we absolutely cannot shut down what we're doing, but we can arrange and we can all talk together and we can give you a window of time to do this. And we didn't know when it was going to be, and we were kind of there for a 3-day window, watching the weather, and it was pretty crazy. And the river was at flood tides or flood stages, not tides. Living here on the coast, sorry. No tides that far.
To get across the river.
30 minutes to do the Mississippi. An hour and a half to do the Missouri. That one was much more difficult. But yeah, so the night before we did the Mississippi, the barge companies called us and said, you have an hour window at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning.
So where on the Mississippi was that?
We went from Port Byron to LeClaire. So it was Illinois to Iowa.
So you can't really practice in real circumstances, right? I mean,
No, because
Missouri with the current and all that.
yeah, so the current was definitely something that I wasn't used to. I've spent 20 years log rolling in pools, and the most wild thing I ever do is log roll in a lake or a pond. So the thought of the currents, and there's pretty good waves out there too. So we actually threw the log in the water in coves on Pretty Marsh, off of Pretty Marsh, where I grew up. And we practiced there. We found a cove, you know, where the tide comes in and the tide goes out, and there were waves. And I would just practice staying on the log for, you know, an hour or 2 hours at a time. And also practice like falling off the log and then trying to climb back onto the log in water over your head, because that's just not something that you usually do when you're competing. Usually you're stepping off of a dock, and then when you're done, you're done. Like, you rarely ever have to scramble back up onto this log. So we had lots of practice, and yeah, it was
So
something.
did you fall off the log?
Not on the Mississippi. On the Mississippi, I stepped off of one dock and I stepped right onto another dock 30 minutes later, and thank you. And I felt quite proud of myself. And when we did the Missouri, it was crazy. It's literally like 4 inches deep and then 20 feet deep. And the currents are creating these whirlpools. And I stepped off from the bank in South Dakota and made it maybe about 10 steps. And a whirlpool like whipped the log so fast that I went into the water, and I was under the water, and I was scrambling to get back up to the log. It took me several tries to get back up on the log and to get going again. And then we got going and everything's going really well. And we get to the middle and there was a sandbar, and you can't tell that the water was just as brown as the Mississippi. So you can't see. And the first time I fell off, it was super deep. It was 20-some feet deep. The second time we were in the middle, and there was a big log stuck on a sandbar sticking up like this, and we were just going right at it, and there was no way around it. When we do these log rolls, that log is actually tethered to a canoe that Mike is in with other team members of ours. So he can kind of do the steering of it. All I can do is back and forth. But if we didn't have some type of a tether on it, like the log would literally just cartwheel down the river. So he's just keeping a little bit of tension upstream to keep the log straight. So then I can run backwards to keep the log moving in a forward motion is really all I can do. So I was running as fast as I could, but I was just not going to make it past that log. And, you know, my fear is drowning. So I did not want to get stuck in a current on a log pile in the middle of the river. And so I had to jump off the log and I just assumed the water was deep and it was only this deep. It was not a pretty fall. And then the canoe got stuck on the sandbar and then it was.
She sustained quite an injury. At that point, like, it was all done. We were calling it Coast Guard, the fire department, they all had boats up there, the National Park Service, and we're in great communication with them. You know, her knee was severely damaged. And
I went in kind of straight-legged thinking I was going into water way over my head. And, you know, I landed very hard in this much water. But yeah, then I sat there for a while. Yeah.
What is the size of the log?
It's a 15-inch diameter and it's 12 feet long.
And is it like a pet log that you carry to all events with you?
You could call it a pet log, yes. So for years, we traveled with a 400-pound Western red cedar log. And that was our competition log and our show log. It would require a forklift when we got to a venue to take it out of the trailer, put it in the pond. And actually another one of lady that I have competed with for years out in the Midwest, her and her mom developed this log, and it's called a key log. It's hollow on the inside and it has a baffle system. So where it's hollow and it's empty, it weighs 65 pounds as compared to our 400-pound log. So you can throw it on racks on your car. 2 people can easily carry it. I mean, 1 person could carry it on your shoulder if you wanted to. You can bring it into a hotel. You can stand it up in an elevator and take it up to a rooftop pool if you wanted to. And then once you get to the pool, it has boat plugs in it. You pop them open, you fill it with water, and then it weighs probably 300 pounds. And because of the baffles in it, it rolls just like our regular log rolling log. The texture has been like they go over it with a grinder, so it's grippy. So you can go barefoot, you can wear sneakers on it. Yeah, so we have a couple of these and we travel all over with them. We have 2 or 3 in our trailers. We have a rack on the truck that we throw them up on, and yeah, that's pretty amazing. So we did, yeah, we made it across.
You got back on the.
I got back on the log from the sandbar. We got the canoe and the log off the sandbar. I got back up on the log, ran the rest of the way across, and then threw the log in the truck, and then drove a half a mile back up the river because we had a show starting like in a half an hour to kick off the expo.
So did you have to be in the show as well?
Yes. Yes, yes, the fire department gave me an ice pack to wrap onto my knee, and I took a handful of aspirin when I got in the truck. But we did it, and yeah, we first person to ever do it. No, you know, whoever wants to can definitely attempt to do it, and if they can do it faster, that's great. But I'm good saying that I was the first, and I have nothing else to prove from that.
Put you in the Guinness Book of World Records.
We didn't contact, we would have had to have contacted them ahead of time. And they would have had to be there, and we just didn't know times and, you know, watching the weather and, you know, all the conditions. We didn't know when anything was going to happen. So I'm happy just to be the first.
How do you make the log go forward? How do you navigate with it?
So you see when we bought this log, it's right here, it doesn't have it on it. So when you buy this log, it kind of comes as a kit, which Abby, who developed it, is a genius. And she wanted a way to teach people that didn't know how to log roll. So here along the edge, like, it has these fins or paddles that you can strap onto the log. And it kind of gives the log a little bit more stability. And it also works as like, we found it in our business to work like a water wheel or a paddle wheel. So we don't, you know, we can log roll without them just fine. But if you put the paddles on and then you step off of a dock, you can use the paddles to paddle your way closer to the audience who's on the other side of our pool. Yeah, so when we had bought a log, we realized that you could use this to kind of travel with, like, you put it on, you run backwards, the log moves forward, you run forward, the log moves backwards. So you can spend all day going back and forth in the pool, back and forth across the pool as much as you want. So, but there's really no steering. It's just forwards or backwards. So, but it's an incredible workout, and yeah, let me know if you guys want to borrow one of our logs. And we do lessons. We actually spend a lot of time doing lessons for kids. So. All right, so all of this had also led me to, I was super honored when the Maine Forest and Logging Museum in Bradley had reached out to me a few years ago and asked if I was willing to be on their board of directors. So have you guys ever, who's been to the Maine Forest and Logging Museum? Awesome. So all of you guys that have not been there, I highly suggest. Bradley is just a few minutes outside of Bangor. The museum is incredible. So it sits on 500 acres of forest. We have beautiful trails. We have, hiking trails, walking trails, incredible wildlife, bird watching. Blackman Stream runs through the center of our property. We have a fishway, so you can watch the alewife run every spring. We do Alewife Day. We have, antique axes, saws, crosscut saws, chainsaws, Peaveys, a working blacksmith shop. We also have a water-powered sawmill that runs off of the water wheel. It's an incredible spot. And
what's it called again?
Maine Forest and Logging Museum in Bradley. We also have the only steam-powered Lombard log hauler. So if you don't know what a Lombard is, imagine a 19-ton locomotive, but instead of driving on train tracks, it has tracks like a tank, like Caterpillar tracks. So we have the only one, and it's actually this one right here, which is the 1907 steam-powered Lombard, and Alvin Lombard developed them right here in Maine, in Waterville. So it's really cool history, ties back to Maine. The only operational one, that's right. There are others, but we actually drive ours, and it's certified, and we have engineers come in from Ohio to drive it at our events, and it's incredible to see it running, like with the steam coming out of it. And I mean, in its day, these were hauling loads probably, a half a mile long of log sleds out of the forest. So it's incredible. So yeah, I would highly recommend that, check it out, come out. If we have events, great, but the grounds are open all the time. So if you just want to go for a quiet walk in the woods, come out and check it out when there's no events going on. So all of my experiences with timber sports and with the Axewomen and with the Maine Forest and Logging Museum actually bring us to what I really want to talk to you guys about, Lumberjills. So during World War I, the majority of Great Britain's traditional workforce, the men, were now fighting overseas. So the Women's Land Army was organized. And these were the women that they worked on farms. They were girls that they were sent to go to rural areas. They were working on farms. They were growing crops. They were taking care of animals. So, and then a specialized division of the Women's Land Army was actually the Women's Timber Corps. And these were the women and girls. Some of these girls were as young as 14 years old, and they went to work in the forests. They were cutting timber for airplane propellers, bridges, ammo boxes. And these women were known as Lumberjills. Do we have any lumberjills here in the audience? Anyone that cuts trees, strong ladies? I'm always recruiting if you are, so. After World War I ended, these lumberjills were replaced, of course, by the men returning home from war. But then it all happened again. During World War II, Great Britain would once again ask her daughters to answer the call of duty on the home front. These were recruiting posters that they used. And so two factors played major roles in the need of the return of the Women's Timber Corps. Once again, the men were called off to war. And Norway was the #1 source of Britain's timber supply, and they had been invaded at the time by the enemy. So the timber reserves were running dangerously low, and they needed to do something. So the Lumberjills were called up once more. So there was a publication out during World War II, and it was created by the Women's Land Army, and it was called The Land Girl. And it was basically, it was to connect and to uplift these women and keep them current on events. And I mean, basically it was aimed to boost morale. So there's some really, you can still find articles, and I mean, it's just incredible. During the war, members of the Women's Timber Corps have tackled every sort of job connected with woods and trees. So there were estimates that 18,000 women and girls volunteered for these positions. They were ladies from England, Scotland, and even Ireland. And you might think most of them were farm girls originally, but they weren't. A lot of these ladies left jobs as secretaries, shop clerks, seamstresses, housekeepers, and some of them came right out of school. Like I said, there was girls 14, 15 years old that volunteered for these positions. So they left their jobs and they left school to travel to the forest and pick up axes. And axes and saws. So this is a crosscut saw that these ladies are using. They were making telegraph poles, and they were also making pit props, which the pit props were incredibly important. That's what kept the coal mining industry going during that time. So that was a huge part of what they were doing. So surprisingly, though, there was really no evidence showing that these women were recruited based upon their sizes or their strengths or any of their abilities to do any of this work. They were trained to do it. The things that were really sought after were enthusiasm, resilience, and good humor, which, you know, kind of makes sense. So they're using a bow saw in this picture. So, you know, these ladies did everything from, you know, cutting the trees to, you know, manufacturing them up into manageable lengths, to hauling them. They were creating rafts of logs to move them across waterways. They were doing the entire process from start to finish. So it's an incredible history. So let's see, their uniforms. The uniforms consisted of riding breeches, tall wool socks, green shirts, sweaters, tall boots, a green beret, and a very coveted badge. So, and These uniforms were not necessarily given to these women. Most of them actually had to purchase their own uniforms. And so there were articles in the Land Girl publication that would let them know where to find these items that were required that they wear. And this was the very coveted badge that the women's timber corps. So a lot of these ladies, this was their first time wearing trousers, which was really a big deal. And there are more than a few stories of these women being ridiculed when they would go to town and people would see women dressed as men, basically. And they were being accused of being too provocative and too promiscuous by wearing pants. So I actually have a really cool excerpt that it was written by a land girl for the publication, The Land Girl. So I want to read it to you. It's about her and, you know, her life trying to fit in this community, because a lot of these girls came from the cities and they were being placed far from home. And a lot of them had never left home before. So this is a story that she wrote. Many of us who are members of the Land Army do not want to remain indefinitely on the outside of rural life. We want to belong, even those of us who expect eventually to return to city life, to say nothing of those who have already made up their minds that they will never be able to face a cramped office existence again. My own first excursion into rural citizenship, apart from very early visits to the local, to get to know people, was by way of books. For the first 3 months of my farm work, I was too absorbed in the different life and too busy to bother much with reading, other than the daily and weekly papers. But as the days began to shorten and the evenings to lengthen, I began to want more solid reading matter. I had seen the familiar county library torch sign on the local school, but when I came to make inquiries, I found the local branch was in abeyance. No one seemed willing to carry out the very simple job of going to the school once a week to change people's books. I approached the library itself and offered to undertake the job. With surprising enthusiasm, they accepted and gave me every help and encouragement. Within a week, I had stuck up the posters they sent me, and by Wednesday, went along to the school to see who would turn out. To my surprise, I found about 20 people came, all very pleased to have the library again. Believe me, the hour I spent there each Wednesday is an hour I look forward to, with its chance to get to know people, to chat, to gossip, to sit and glance through books in intervals between customers. And of course, I get as many books as I want to myself. And it all costs us absolutely nothing. I would add that while I can enjoy a thriller or a novel as anyone, I have also been very glad to request technical books on farming, many of which have been a great help to me in my work and have given me a wider all-around view of agriculture and its problems. During the winter months, the village got up a series of lectures on first aid given by a local doctor. To fill my time, I went along. In due course, I passed the very simple preliminary exam. As only about 9 people went through this far, I was next asked to form the personnel of the village first aid point. I did not particularly relish it, but I did not like to refuse. Actually, it has been rather amusing, and now our point is one of the county star points well in the eye of the local Red Cross. Recently, we had a parish meeting to which all adults were invited to discuss and coordinate activities in the village. This was quite good fun, as everyone had something to say, and praise and criticism were bandied about equally, frankly, and freely. The most interesting suggestion was that harvest patrols should be organized, where 2 people should undertake to be out on watches 2 or 3 hours a night to keep an eye for any field fires. I sat and fidgeted wondering if I dared suggest what I had in mind. For it was my corn that they were talking about, corn for which I had plowed and cultivated and harrowed and drilled and rolled and weeded. When someone else took the lead, why shouldn't women go on these patrols? The meeting agreed, and I was the first to put my name down. We shall share the lookout manned every night on the little hill above the village, and I must admit, I'm looking forward to my vigils up there in the quiet night, watching the fields under the stars, ready to call for help at once should anything suspicious occur. One farmer has placed his spinney at the disposal of the neighbors, and we are going there to cut branches to make bazooms, which will be distributed about to the different farms to be ready to hand out to beat out any fires. Well, these are the only official excursions I have taken so far into village life, but out of them, I have arisen all sorts of unofficial personal contacts. I am given lettuces, marrows, broad beans, jam, flowers, for which I swap peas, cucumbers, tomatoes, and other flowers. I have gone to the various socials, which have been run during the winter. The star turn being to see our portly rector dance boomps-a-daisy with the landlady from the pub. And now, when I go to the local, I swap drink for drink with the rest of the village as one human being to another. I can thoroughly recommend other members of the land army to take advantage of any opportunities that offer without spoiling things by pushing themselves in to take part of life in the village. I believe such activities do more than anything else to break down any prejudice against women on the land and to make for smooth working on all sides in this job we have undertaken for the duration. That was a really interesting article about just becoming part of the community that these women were put into. So while that was going on, meanwhile, back here in the USA, during World War II, our women were building ships, flying planes. Think of Rosie the Riveter. So there was one little town, though, in New Hampshire, where women were actually sawing up a storm. This is a really, really incredible story. So in Concord, New Hampshire, the US Forest Service actually built its very first, a women-operated sawmill. So there was this, they had a hurricane a few years before, and they had all this lumber that had been sitting there in a pond, and it was going to be milled, but then the war started, and the men left. So 13 local women stepped up to run the Turkey Pond sawmill. They left jobs just as the Lumberjills did. They left their jobs as waitresses and retail clerks. One notable thing is that they were making a pretty decent daily wage. So their job as a waitress was paying maybe $1.40 a day. The shop clerks were getting up to $1.80 a day. The starting pay to run the sawmill was $4 a day for a woman. So I mean, that was pretty incredible at the time. So 1942, US Forest Service built what they promoted as the first of its kind in the country, a woman-operated sawmill. It was experimental at its start, but the Forest Service soon took notice, and documents dated November of 42 from the US Forest Service. Employing women to work in its sawmill at Turkey Pond on a trial basis was followed up 3 weeks later with documents reading, the experiment being conducted in the use of women to run a sawmill operation. Further word has been received. The female mill at Turkey Pond is going along nicely. It is most surprising and gratifying to see the way those gals take hold of the job. in addition to the jobs we anticipated women could handle, we have found them capable of rolling logs on the deck, running the edger, and for show purposes, even running the head saw. Maybe it will be possible to actually man a mill 100% with women in the future. So that's an incredible history, and it's very close to home. It's, not very far away. So, definitely one of my favorite stories. So, as World War II ended, so came the end of the Women's Timber Corps. They were disbanded. They were actually required to hand in their uniforms and their badges. And a lot of the records were destroyed or lost. So there was very little history of all of this that had gone on. This had also been published in The Land Girl after the war had ended. All members of the Women's Land Army will wish their sisters of the Timber Corps the best of luck in the future for the fine trail they have blazed in the world of women pioneers. And so that was written by the minister of the program, Clegg. So thankfully, there were some people that did not let this history die completely. And there have been a lot of historians that have really, brought it back to light. So actually in October of 2007, a memorial was unveiled to the members of the Women's Timber Corps. It's a life-size bronze sculpture of a lumberjill, and it's in tribute to these women, the Lumberjills. You can find this in Queen Elizabeth Forest Park in Scotland. And there's actually really great stories. There's some people had reached out to actual Lumberjills who had been in their teens and 20s at the time that they were working, and considerably older now, but they did bring them, and there were actual Lumberjills at the unveiling of this memorial. So that was pretty cool. In each and every story and account that I have read and researched, the one thing that really hits me is that all of these women, they talk about the same thing, that their time as a land girl or a lumberjill was the most memorable and empowering time of their lives. And it's a story that a lot of them said that they didn't talk about for years because they didn't think it was that important. They didn't think that people would believe what they were doing. So there's actually some authors now that I want to tell you about. Joanna Fote, if you guys want to do any more follow-up or research or reading on your own. So I had reached out to Joanna. I've been a huge fan of hers for years, and I sent her an email last year, and she was so wonderful and gracious. And she actually sent along most of the pictures that we were allowed to show you guys tonight. Those are her pictures that she spent years traveling around to these lumberjills and talking with these women now and collecting a lot of their memorabilia. And so she was able to share it with us to share with you guys. And so she's written several books. Maybe even see if the library has them. And then, the other book that I would highly recommend, it's super short, but it's really good reading. There's some great photos in there, was They Sawed Up a Storm, from the ladies down in the New Hampshire sawmill. So if you guys are looking for any more lumberjill reading. So, people are always kind of surprised by seeing women in forestry and the timber industry and in timber sports, but it's not a new thing. Like, we've been doing it for a very long time. It just wasn't always recognized. So, and one of the things that we've found kind of recently is that the word lumberjill is not in the dictionary. So
You're working on that?
we are working on that, and I'm going to ask all of you to work on that as well. So yeah, we discovered that. And so in 2021, we started a campaign to get the word lumberjill in the dictionary. We reached out to Merriam-Webster, and they said the best way that you can do that is we need to see it organically in order to put it in our dictionary. So they said, talk about it, write about it, social media, post about it. So, we started our little hashtag Lumberjill campaign. So anyone on social media, feel free to hashtag Lumberjill, tell everyone about it. Let's get it in there. We were really excited to see in 2022, the Oxford English Dictionary they brought in the word lumberjill. So that was, I wish we could take credit, but I feel like it was in the works before I said anything. But yeah, we're still working really hard on Merriam-Webster. And yeah, so I'm gonna ask all of you guys to help us spread the word. So because of everything that I've gotten to do with my job and my really unique career, I've really gotten some amazing opportunities that have come my way. I've traveled to New York City to be on the Harry Connick Jr. show. Queen Latifah flew us to LA to be on the Queen Latifah show and teach her how to axe throw. So one day last year, I got a Facebook message from a lady named Brianna Wing. And Bri is actually a Maine native, but she makes her home in LA now. She's a very accomplished producer, director, actor. She is working on a documentary about women in timber sports, but also 100 years before that and leading up to it, and the wartime Lumberjills. So she had reached out to us and asked if she could come here and work with us and travel around a little bit with us and see what we're doing. And she traveled to some competitions. So she's working on this amazing documentary. It's not quite done yet, but she has sent us the sizzle reel, which is the preview to what she's doing. And she's given us permission to share it with you guys. Do you guys want to see it and see what she's been up to?
I am not what people expect when I say that I'm a lumberjill. They're just like, a lumberjill, what is that?
I get to swing a razor sharp axe between my feet and cut a block in half. I was like, yeah, I'll do that.
The pout of the chainsaw one goes,
People's perception of what a lumberjack is are really not what we are.
You don't have to be a 300-pound man to compete in timber sports. We have law enforcement, business owners, doctors, veterinarians, collegiate girls, and we have grandmas. We all have targets and shopping stands in our yards. Mike and I will throw axes quite often at home just after dinner. I've won some world championships over the years, and I'm also the only person to ever log roll across the Mississippi River and the Missouri River.
I also broke a world record in underhand.
The year that I won the world championship in axe throwing, I got a check for $300. My axe costs more than $300. There can be a difference in the prize money and the prizes for women versus men.
My favorite event is modified chainsaws that run on methanol and nitro fuel. Take a motorcycle engine or snowmobile engine and turn it into a chainsaw.
We're all different shape, sizes, colors. We're all feminine. We all are beautiful.
Cut my first block when I was 50 years old.
We've seen kids competing at 8 or 9 years old.
It's a dangerous sport. It's a lot of fun.
You gotta dance, my friend, you gotta dance.
If you guys have any, or try to share any more information with you, if I know the answers to your questions.
Where do you live?
We live in Ellsworth. Yep. Yeah.
Sport looks a little dangerous, is it?
Not if you do it correctly and are trained correctly from the beginning. So, you know, there's just lots of safety protocols that you follow. When we're chopping and we're chopping this far from our toes, we're actually wearing chainmail socks. People always ask why we're not wearing steel toes. And it's because you're not going to miss and hit your foot, but if you were to hit a knot or something inside your log, the axe can glance. And when that happens, it comes sideways into your foot and it hits just behind and underneath the steel toe. So steel toes, like logging boots, are not going to do anything for you. So that's why we wear sneakers and chainmail socks. So it will still hurt and you're gonna break your toes, but you're not going to cut them off, so.
Were you originally, many years ago, with Timber Tina?
I did some shows with her for a few years early on. Yeah. Yep.
You've really gone on. I mean, it's amazing.
Thank you.
And the history that you're bringing into it.
Yeah,
we totally new.
Thank you, and that's what was really important, just to show the other side of it. That
the history, the logging history.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. I think it's really an incredible history that really should be shared. Yeah.
Do you do this presentation in other places?
We do. Yeah. Yeah, so we, on our Axwoman team, we have 42 ladies, and so we travel coast to coast doing that. The ladies will compete actually worldwide, competing. I think several of them are in Australia and New Zealand right now competing. And heading back this way for our season to begin here. But yeah, I mean, Mike and I are lucky enough. We travel all over the place. Doing this, we also teach women's chainsaw safety. We have an organization that does axe throwing and log rolling with veterans groups around North America called Woods and Warriors. So we are incredibly lucky that we get to travel with our very cool dog, and that's our life, so.
Yeah. They can go ahead.
I'm glad the library here, Northeast, invited you to come so I can see what you're doing.
Thank you.
I'm one of the trustees of that little library in Somerville.
Oh, you are?
And I would love to talk to you separately and
please
arrange a program for you to do this same.
Absolutely.
Historical.
Yeah.
Thing right in your own hometown.
Absolutely, I would love that.
Well, you were in Pretty Marsh, but
we didn't have a library in Pretty Marsh. Right. You would have been our library.
But I would love to talk to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me give you my contact info at the end. Thank you so much. You had a question?
Yeah, have you been able to connect with any of the surviving Timber Corps members or their families in your travels at various competitions?
I have not personally. I've gotten all of my information from Joanna Fote, who has just devoted so much of her time into doing that and going and visiting the surviving women and their families, and literally like pulling shoe boxes out from under beds filled with these black and white photos that no one had seen for so many years. That, now she's, I think the newest book that Joanna just published is actually just a picture. It's just black and white photos. So I've yet to see that one, but I've read a lot about it, and it looks incredible. It's the photos that she's been able to dig up over the years. So.
Just a funny story. I grew up in a house with 5 fireplaces, and we used to use them. So I have 4 brothers. We cut a lot of wood, but my sister could operate a crosscut, so a lot faster.
That's awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for coming out. Like I said, I'm happy to answer any questions if you guys have it, but feel free if you guys want to head off to dinner and go home too. Thank you.